Good day, everyone. So we're reviewing Wetzel Limnology textbook. This is edition number 4, and we're on chapter 15, the phosphorus cycle. And right now we're looking at phosphorus cycling in running waters and dissolved and particulate phosphorus in rivers. Dissolved inorganic phosphorus, DIP, more correctly referred to as soluble reactive phosphorus, or SRP, because the analytical method can include some organic phosphorus, averages about 10 microgram of phosphorus per liter worldwide among unpolluted rivers. Total dissolved phosphorus, SUP and SRP, averages about 25 micrograms per liter. SRP in river water often increases by a factor of 2 to 4-fold during and following increases in discharge from heavy rainfall events or in the early stages of snowmelt. SRP in rivers often increases to level of 50 to 100 micrograms of phosphorus per liter or more from agricultural runoff and to over 1,000 micrograms of phosphorus per liter from municipal sewage sources. Uptake occurs both by physical adsorption to benthic substrata and to particulate cestone, as well as through assimilation by attached biota. Although uptake of SRP by planktonic cestone may be small, approximately 1% of total uptake in small streams, cestonic uptake increases markedly in larger streams, particularly when dominated by phytoplankton. Some of the cestone and adsorbed phosphorus may settle out during base flows and then later be transported downstream during storm-induced high discharge. Exchange from these particles to the water may then occur in these displaced locations. Biological utilization. Biological uptake of phosphorus by algae, cyanobacteria, bacteria, and larger aquatic plants generally follows Michaelis-Menten kinetics. Higher trophic levels cannot transport phosphate from surrounding water and are dependent on ingesting food to meet their phosphorus needs. Growth rates at steady state generally follows monad growth rate kinetics, which is mathematically similar to Michaelis-Menten kinetics. Many algae and bacteria assimilate phosphorus at rates more rapidly than used for growth and store the excess. As a result, cells accumulate phosphorus and steady-state growth occurs at concentration much lower than the half-saturation constant. Uptake rates of phosphorus by coarse particulate organic matter and microbiota associated with it commonly reach a maximum in 15 to 20 days and then decline precipitously. Average cestonic algal abundance has been positively correlated with total phosphorus and average phosphorus concentration of many streams at moderate levels of nutrient loadings, but becomes increasingly less responsive, as in lakes, to nutrient loadings at higher phosphorus concentration. Summer mean chlorophyll A concentration of cestone among temperate streams exhibit a curvy linear relationship with summer mean total phosphorus concentrations. The amount of nutrients loading to a river increases with greater catchment area. The analysis indicated that the phosphorus cestonic chlorophyll A relationship increased some 2.3-fold as the area increased from 100 to 100,000 kilometers squared. It is important to note that the primary productivity of rivers is generally much less responsive to increased nutrient loading than in the productivity of lakes. As will be discussed later in the section of algal productivity, nutrient availability is generally higher in rivers than in lakes. Nutrient losses in lakes are greater and large quantities are stored in parts of the ecosystem that are not readily available to the producers. So let's look at figure 15-2. Phosphorus cestonic chlorophyll A relationship in temperate streams and lakes. Solid curves indicate predicted chlorophyll A concentration in rivers of different catchment areas, AC, of 100 and 100,000 kilometers square. The dashed curve depicts the trajectory of chlorophyll A concentration in phosphorus-limited lakes in which total nitrogen to phosphorus is greater than 25. So y-axis we have the chlorophyll in milligram per meter cube. X-axis we have total phosphorus in milligram per meter cube. So we are comparing chlorophyll to phosphorus. So chlorophyll being a product of photosynthesis, of course. And so we have here, we have two different types of lake in terms of their catchment areas. So this is a smaller catchment area of 100 kilometers square, and this is a larger catchment area of 100,000 kilometers squared, and both are streams. So what we can see is that for larger catchment areas, we have, as the chlorophyll increases, we have an increase in the total phosphorus more than we do for smaller catchment areas. So there is a limit in the production of chlorophyll for smaller catchment area than there is for larger catchment areas for streams. And then this is our lakes, and so that's the depicted trajectory. So we are looking at the same relationship, and instead of streams here we're looking at lakes. So what we see from the get-go is we don't have phosphorus being a limiting to chlorophyll production here, and so it's a very different curve. And so we have high values of chlorophyll for like mid-range values of phosphorus, of total phosphorus at in the 250 range, already 200, and we never had that. I mean, we had like 250, and at best in streams with the large catchment areas, we only like come up with about 60 milligrams per meter cube for chlorophyll. Adsorption, release, and recycling. The kinetics of abiotic adsorption and desorption of phosphorus onto and from organic and inorganic particles, such as natural sediments and suspended particles, generally comply with Langmuir isotherms. Fine particles, less than 0.1 millimeter, account for nearly all of the absorption capacity for phosphorus, 0.1 to 1.0 microgram of phosphorus per gram of sediment per microgram of phosphorus per liter of water. The adsorption capacities of particles saturate and reach quasi-steady state in which uptake and release are about balanced. The abundance of phosphate is also regulated by solubility reactions, particularly in relation to solid solution association with colloid or particles. Phosphorus concentration in turbid rivers with low calcium concentration are influenced by a solid ferric hydroxide phosphate present in colloidal suspension or in suspended particulates. In hard water streams, the solubility of inorganic phosphorus can decrease as pH increases above 8.5, as is common in areas of intensive photosynthesis. Precipitation of inorganic phosphorus as calcium phosphate, highly stable as hydroxyapatite, increased to greater than 60% at calcium concentration approaching 100 milligrams per liter and pH values of 9.0 or greater. If calcium carbonate precipitate under these conditions, phosphorus can be co-precipitated into the crystals and also adsorbed to the surfaces of the carbonates. These carbonate deposits are common in travertine incrustation in rivers that receive groundwaters supersaturated with calcium and bicarbonates. Thus, the major divalent metal ions in water, calcium and magnesium, tend to destabilize particles and enhance aggregation and sedimentation rates. In contrast, dissolved organic matter tends to stabilize colloidal particles in stream and lake water, slowing aggregation rates and thereby lowering sedimentation rates. Separation distances and efficacy of van der Waals forces for attraction and aggregation, however, vary greatly with different types and concentration of natural dissolved organic compounds and with the ionic strength of charged colloids or particles. As particulate organic matter increases, as commonly results from leaf fall in late fall and winter in temperate woodland streams, phosphorus uptake can increase as the particulate organic matter increases. It is during this time as well that fungal activity is maximal on particulate organic matter, and bacterial activities are maximal on dissolved organic matter leaching from the particulate organic matter. Spiraling describes the cycling of nutrients in streams as they are assimilated from the water column into benthic biomass, temporarily retained and mineralized back into the water column, where they are transported downstream. Phosphorus uptake length and hence total spiraling length decreases in winter. These rates are counteracted at other times when detrital particulate organic matter is reduced by ice discharge associated with storms. Recycling of phosphorus in streams. As discussed earlier in terms of the biota of lakes, phosphorus can be released by excretion in inorganic and organic forms from living microbiota or as the organism senesce, die, and lyse. Phosphorus can also be released during the ingestion of consuming animals. As in lakes, the dissolved organic phosphorus compounds in streams are utilized enzymatically appreciably more slowly than DIP. Because of their slower rates of utilization, an accumulation of phosphorus compounds of high molecular weight, greater than 5,000 Dalton, occurs, and these compounds are exported downstream for subsequent utilization. The spiraling of phosphorus has been measured in only a few streams. In a first-order woodland stream in Tennessee, the spiraling length was 190 meters, most of it associated with the water movement, and the remainder in the particulate components, mostly coarse and fine particulate matter. Less than 3% of the total passed through the invertebrate and vertebrate consumers. Phosphorus uptake length ranged from 21 to 165 meters and varied inversely with the quantity of detritus on the stream sediments. In a large river in Michigan, phosphorus uptake length varied between 1,100 and 1,700 meters. Most streams, however, have considerable uptake capacity for phosphorus, with uptake length in the range of 5 to 200 meters. Long-term evaluation of phosphorus dynamics in streams are rare. Examination of an average annual phosphorus budget for a forested second-order stream ecosystem of New Hampshire illustrates some of the potential transport and transformation processes. Phosphorus inputs were dominated by dissolved and fine particulate phosphorus, 63%, and falling and wind-blown litter, 23%. Subsurface inflows, 10%, and precipitation, 5%, were relatively small sources of phosphorus in this ecosystem. The geologic export of phosphorus in the stream water was the only removal vector of consequence. On an annual basis, no annual net retention of phosphorus occurred in the stream. Table 15-3. Phosphorus budget for a forested second-order stream, Bear Brook in New Hampshire. So we have the inputs, we have then the exports, and then we have milligram of phosphorus per meter square per year, and then we have the percentage of total. So inputs, we have dissolved, so that's 28% of the total, and 72% is in particulate form. Export, we have dominated by particulate and at 81% and dissolved at 19%. However, over a short period of time, inputs exceeded export with phosphorus accumulation. The accumulated phosphorus was exported in large pulses during precipitation-mediated episodes of high stream discharge. Similar exports have been observed in many other stream ecosystems. For example, in a detailed analysis of daily phosphorus dynamics in a small second-order stream in Michigan, passing through a wetland to a lake, between 60 and 80% of the annual phosphorus from this stream to the receiving lake occurred during 3 major precipitation events. This is also true of the many catchments in the boreal ecozone that contain wetlands, home to a large portion of the world's lakes and streams. The wetlands retain some of their phosphorus input for short periods, but release it downstream during periods of high flow or during periods when the wetland vegetation senesces. external natural and anthropogenic sources of phosphorus. A. Terrestrial runoff via tributaries. Surface drainage is usually a major contributor of phosphorus to streams and lakes. In general, the regional chemical characteristics of surface waters are closely related to the soil characteristics of their drainage basin and land use. Soils, in turn, reflect the regional geological and climatic characteristics. The quantities of phosphorus transported to surface drainage vary with the amount of phosphorus in soils, topography, vegetative cover, quantity and duration of runoff flow, land use, and pollution. For example, wetlands are a major source of phosphorus to headwater lakes on the Precambrian Shield in North America. The parent rock material from which soil evolves by weathering is extremely variable in phosphorus content, and this variability increases with the thickness and heterogeneity of the stratified soil layers. Basic igneous rock contains relatively little phosphorus, usually as apatite. Phosphorus percentage of other substrates are typically as follows. Sandstone is approximately 0.02, gneiss is approximately 0.04, unweathered loess is approximately 0.07, andesite is 0.16, and diabase is 0.03%. Limestone containing approximately 1.3% phosphorus, and rare deposit of rock phosphate 10 to 15% phosphorus, in which biotic accumulation either from the organisms themselves or from guano, where concentrated, are largely of sedimentary origin. Surface layers of soil are relatively rich in organic phosphorus from plant detritus in various stages of decomposition by the action of soil fungi and bacteria. The exchange capacity of soils for phosphorus depends on the composition of the soil and increases with greater quantities of organic and inorganic colloids. Phosphorus is most available and easily leached from soils having a pH of 6 to 7. At lower pH values, phosphorus combines readily with aluminum, iron, and manganese. Therefore, where drainage basins are acidified from atmospheric pollution, inputs of phosphorus in runoff from acidified soils are reduced. At pH 6 and above, progressively greater amount of phosphate are associated with calcium as apatite and calcium phosphates. Table 15-4. Concentration of nitrogen and phosphorus in runoff from Miami silt loam of different gradients. After data from this author. So in gram per meter square per year, gradient in percentage. And so nitrogen 2, phosphorus 0.06. With a higher gradient of 20%, we have nitrogen increases as well as phosphorus increases here. And table 15-5, we have relative erosion from soil in relation to vegetative cover and land use, Pacific Northwest of the US. So relative erosion. So where we have high erosion is for the agricultural areas, the row crops and fallow, orchard and vineyards, wheat fallow, stubble not burned, wheat fallow, stubble burned. So where the stubble is burned, we have higher erosion than when it's not burned. And then on the other end of the spectrum, forest, dove, pastures, humid region, or irrigated, relative erosion is pretty low. And then we have a range for where it's like a cattle range, let's say, or poor pasture, 5 to 10 in terms of relative erosion. The topography of the catchment basin influences the flow path of runoff and extent of erosion and the subsequent export of nutrients. Flatlands with little runoff and relatively high infiltration rates contribute less nutrient load to runoff than similar lands with steeper gradients. Further, the relative erosion is influenced markedly by the type of vegetation and use to which the land is put. Disturbances to the land cover can also have marked effects on nutrient releases to runoff water. For example, phosphorus and nitrogen concentration of stream waters increase from 5 to 60-fold over background levels within the first 2 days after forest wildfires impacted the stream catchments. Much of the nutrient loading was leached from ash. Returns to background concentration of nutrients range from several weeks to years. The literature on this subject is large, and the reader is referred to the reviews examining phosphorus input from runoff. An attempt has been made to classify natural and agricultural areas on the basis of the quantity of nitrogen and phosphorus in runoff. Application of fertilizers and land management practices, both in agriculture and forestry, will modify and generally increase these values considerably. Urbanization results in increases in the amount of phosphorus discharged to surface waters in approximate proportion to population densities. Phosphorus originating from heavy residential fertilization and storm sewer drainage can increase phosphorus input to surface drainage. For example, in the largest lake of southwestern Michigan, Gull Lake, approximately 24% of the total phosphorus entering this eutrophic lake was from fertilization of lakeside lawns. The soil of 75% of the lawns, however, were saturated with phosphorus, making addition unnecessary. In contrast, loading of phosphorus to a large, undisturbed Arctic lake were nearly entirely from stream inputs, largely as dissolved phosphorus. So I think that's going to be it for today, and tomorrow we'll pick it up with this, in many cases, lakes receive drainage in that area of the chapter. And thanks for attending today's presentation on the phosphorus cycle, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.